If and when the crypto bill is passed, all of Coinbase's competitive advantages will almost disappear overnight. If you watched my video from February 10th, 2026, then the recent news about the new draft of the Clarity Act banning stablecoin yields should not surprise you. Today, I'm going to be talking about how this new draft bill takes away your right to seek higher yield, how it really affects companies like Coinbase and the banks, and what it really means for the future for crypto users and investors. If you care about the right of people to use crypto, or if you're just a crypto investor, you definitely want to hear this. This channel is about adding value for you on your financial journey. The new draft bill that came out from the Senate for the Clarity Act essentially bans stablecoin yields altogether. If any type of company has payment stablecoins and offer yields in any type of way that resembles bank deposits, that is now banned. So this effectively stops companies like Coinbase and Kraken from offering stablecoin yields to their customers. If this bill was to pass, it essentially takes away consumer choice. It doesn't allow consumers to decide what's the product for them. It attempts to lower competition by taking away those options. Why are banks doing this? Well, their official claim is that if stablecoin yields are allowed to continue, then those customers will remove their funds from the banks, since the banks offer much lower yields, and then that would harm the lending market. And how it works now is that basically many customers, trillions of dollars, keep their monies in checking or savings accounts at banks where they literally only get a 0% to 0.5% interest rate. These same banks take customer deposits, lend it out for 10%, 15%, even 20%. And that difference is called net interest margin, and that's their profit. And they make a lot of it. For most banks, this is 50 to 60% of their total revenue. That is why they are fighting very hard to keep this. But as we continue our discussion, go ahead and subscribe so you can continue to get valuable insights that look through the noise and the hype. But one thing to add about this is that this assumes most consumers are not that smart. This assumes that consumers don't have the ability to seek higher yield. And I believe that is what is changing. Because just think about it. On your funds at the bank, you're making 0 to 0.5%. Inflation is 3 to 5% plus, and banks are literally lending out your funds for 10 to 15 or 20%. The bank's profit is that they're definitely beating inflation. You are underperforming inflation at 0 to 0.5% when inflation is 3% or even greater. If this was the case, why are consumers continuing to hold their funds at banks? It's something that's been happening a long time, so people are used to it. The federal government offers FDIC insurance that covers bank losses up to $250,000. So a lot of customers have peace of mind from that. And ultimately, most consumers are sticky. Once they get used to a certain product, used to a certain company, used to a certain service, they are less likely to change or leave. And that is what banks are hoping that you will continue to do if they're able to block stablecoin yields. Now, the other interesting thing about this is that banks can offer a higher yield. Right now, Coinbase typically offers around 3 to 4% on its USDC deposits. Banks could technically raise the deposit interest rate on its checking and savings account to match Coinbase's. But they don't want to do that because they would extremely lower their net interest profit margin. Instead of paying 0 to depositors and loaning it out for 15%, they would have to pay 4% to depositors and loan it out for 15%. This would significantly cut into their profit margins. Also, banks just want to delay. Blockchain technology is going to cut down on their profit and their business in so many ways. Some customers will use DeFi yield and get the 7, 8, 9, 10%. So they're going to take their funds away from banks. Think about bank wires. People are paying $25 to $45 to wire money to somebody. Now that same wire can be done for pennies and settles in minutes. So charging $25 to $45 doesn't make sense anymore. Think about Swift transactions, cross-border money transfers. Some of those transactions are $35, $45 to the sender and receiver. Now those same transactions can also be done that cost only pennies and settles within minutes or less. So while banks likely know that the tide is against them and they're going to have to find a way to find more revenue or get less revenue from these traditional things that they've gotten in the past, they're going to fight it as long as possible. For Coinbase, this news is also a huge loss for them. Their stock dropped 10% when the news came out. Circle, who actually is the issuer of USDC, its stock was down 20%. While there are other ways for Coinbase to make money, if this law actually passes, it directly harms the adoption of stablecoins and would actually negatively impact the bottom line or the profit for Coinbase. For Coinbase, stablecoin yield is so important because, as you can see in my previous video, they now depend on this revenue. Stablecoin revenue, which comes from the stablecoin yield on USDC, was up 61% in just 1 year. And stablecoin revenue is now the second biggest category of revenue for Coinbase and one of the fastest growing. Transaction revenue for Coinbase, due to various factors, is down 45%, and Coinbase's CEO has publicly stated the intent to diversify away from transaction revenue, which is rapidly declining. And stablecoin revenue right now is the only segment I see that can actually replace the rapidly declining transaction revenue in the near term. So for Coinbase, they are definitely going to dig their feet in. As the CEO has said previously, they'd rather have no bill than a bad bill. This is directly material to their future as a business. And their strategy, as I stated before, is going to be delay, delay, delay. If no bill is passed, then Coinbase can continue its business, get more USDC deposits, and pay out more stablecoin yield and get those revenues. Well, a lot of people are wondering, why did Coinbase lose this battle? Coinbase has a lot of money, but they still don't have the money and influence that Wall Street and the banks have had for decades. And this chart illustrates why. So you can see banks have been doing political lobbying for the long term. Since 2014, they've consistently given 70 to 80 million plus each year lobbying. Even when the market was down, such as 2018, the S&P was down 4%, but their bank lobbying went up from 77 million to 78 million. In 2022, the S&P 500 was down 18%, but bank lobby spending went up 11% from around 73 million to around 81 million. Even when the market goes down, banks still spend more money for lobbying. And this is why political policy and influence is so important, whether it's crypto, banks, or other industries. It is very hard to win if you don't have no political influence. Laws can literally be passed that pick winners, as we see that the banks are attempting to do now. And as I said before, this is quite alarming because literally the politicians are taking away consumer choice and obviously picking winners. But crypto is not as far behind as we think in political lobbying. In 2018, they started just at 1.8 million. And by 2025, they had spent a 22x jump to 40.7 million. So this is phenomenal. And it really shows how the crypto industry is waking up to the political fight that they have to do. They are still less than half what banks did in 2025, but this is still progress. And we also have to realize that the banks have been doing this for decades. Crypto just started less than a decade ago. So many of the politicians that are in there today have been funded by years by the big banks. So it's going to be an uphill battle for the crypto industry in the political space for laws because you have entrenched politicians backed by decade-long bank lobbyists. The other benefit that we do have, as I stated in my previous video, is that Donald Trump really likes crypto. It's one of the key initiatives along with AI that he supports. And also stablecoin issuers are now a big buyer of US treasuries, which with all the government spending is a benefit for the US government. So Coinbase's strategy to stop any bill from getting passed, if it's not a good one, has some benefits and some very big risks. The obvious benefit for Coinbase is that they can continue to pay stablecoin yields and get more USDC deposits. But the negative is that if in 2.5 years, a different president is installed, that person feels differently towards crypto, and they install someone at the head of the SEC, such as Gensler, then we can have another situation where crypto, DeFi developers all become enemies. So the best case is us getting sound crypto regulation, not having no regulation, because the administrations change every 2 years and then every 4 years in a big way. What about the future of crypto users like yourself? I would say first, educate yourself, subscribe to my channel, and then take your financial future in your own hands. You have to learn how to use crypto yourself. And concerning DeFi, I've created a video talking about how people can individually seek out higher DeFi yields. Obviously, DeFi yields are not risk-free, but it does give you the opportunity to earn much higher yields on your funds. As an investor, as I stated before, Coinbase is a great company. But in my horse and racetrack analogy, Coinbase is just another horse on the racetrack. There are plenty of others. You have Wall Street and investment firms. They are doing crypto custody. They are doing stake ETFs that compete with Coinbase. You also have Robinhood, NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange. All of these companies also plan to offer 24/7 tokenized equity trading to compete directly with Coinbase. But the worst of all are stablecoins. Although Coinbase has a fabulous agreement with USDC, there are literally no barriers of entry for stablecoins, domestic and foreign. You already have companies like PayPal, SoFi, Western Union offering or plan to offer their own USD stablecoins. And you're likely to have dozens of USD stablecoins come online in the next year or so. But there is something that you won't see dozens of, and that's Ethereum. That's the infrastructure. That's the one that has a lot of barriers to entry. You cannot easily copy Ethereum. The security, the trust is things it's taken a decade to gain. Ethereum has that advantage. Ethereum is the racetrack. Own the racetrack. Do not own just one of the horses. If you own the racetrack, as long as all the horses use your track, you win. And that's what's the angle on stablecoin yields. Banks won't be able to stop the rising tide of tokenization. The rising tide of blockchain technology is here, and it's here to stay. Your best bet as an investor is to focus on those infrastructure plays, those plays that cannot be easily copied, that have very high barriers to entry, like Ethereum, like Solana, or like Chainlink. But those are just my thoughts. What are yours? If you enjoyed this video, believe it has some valuable insights, hit the subscribe button, turn on those notifications, and I'll see you next time.